My husband's mother stood at the head of the dining table, lifted her chin, and said, "All in favor of removing Natalie from future Carlisle family gatherings?" For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then her hand went up. After that, the others followed, one by one: his older sister, his younger brother, his aunt, 2 cousins, even his grandmother, who looked ashamed but still raised her fingers halfway. And then I looked at my husband. Andrew sat beside me with his jaw tight, eyes fixed on the water glass in front of him like the answer might be floating somewhere near the ice cubes. I waited. I gave him one last chance. He did not raise his hand, but he did not lower theirs either. Sometimes silence is not neutral. Sometimes silence is just betrayal without fingerprints. The vote happened in the old Carlisle house, the place they called the family home, a wide brick colonial at the end of a tree-lined road outside Richmond, Virginia. White columns, green shutters, a wraparound porch. A dining room with dark wood walls and oil portraits of dead relatives who looked just as judgmental as the living ones. For 7 years, I had cooked in that kitchen, cleaned that dining room after Thanksgiving, paid repairmen when pipes burst, sent checks when property taxes were due, and smiled through little insults because I thought marriage meant trying. And now, in that same dining room, they were voting me out like I was an employee who had failed probation. My mother-in-law, Margaret Carlisle, looked at me with the calm satisfaction of a woman who believed she had finally restored order. "This isn't personal," she said. That almost made me laugh. People only say that when they are doing something deeply personal and do not want to feel guilty. Andrew's sister, Vanessa, folded her hands on the table. "We just think family events have become tense since you came around. Since I came around, 7 years of marriage, 2 miscarriages. One business crisis I had quietly helped them survive, hundreds of meals, hospital visits, birthday gifts, emergency checks. And still, to them, I had only come around." Andrew finally whispered, "Nat, maybe we should talk about this privately." I looked at him. "Now you want private?" His face flushed. Margaret cleared her throat. "Natalie, please don't make this unpleasant." I looked around the table at all the raised hands, then at the old brass chandelier above us, then at the wallpaper I had paid to restore after a roof leak 3 winters ago. Unpleasant. That was their word for a woman noticing her own humiliation. I stood, slowly. The chair legs scraped against the hardwood. Every eye followed me. I picked up my purse. Then I looked directly at Margaret. "You held a vote in a house you think belongs to you." Her smile tightened. "This house has been in our family for generations." "No," I said softly. "It has been in your family stories for generations." The room went still. I turned toward Andrew. "You have 1 week to tell them the truth." His face went pale. Margaret frowned. "What truth?" I smiled then, not because I was happy. Because after 7 years of being treated like an outsider in a room I had saved, I finally understood something. They did not know where they were sitting. They did not know whose roof was over their heads. They did not know the woman they had just voted out owned the house they were meeting in. "My name is Natalie Price Carlisle. I was 35 years old when my husband's family held a formal vote to cut me out of birthdays, holidays, reunions, Sunday dinners, and all Carlisle family decisions. They thought I would cry. They thought I would beg. They thought I would apologize for being difficult, like I had so many times before. Instead, 1 week later, they opened a certified letter from my attorney and learned the family house. The table, the porch, the land, the renovated kitchen, and the dining room where they raised their hands against me were all legally owned by my company. Before I tell you what happened when Margaret Carlisle realized she had voted me out of my own property, comment below. What would you do if your husband stayed silent while his family voted to remove you? Would you forgive him, or would his silence be the end? Comment not your table if you already know this family was about to regret every raised hand. I did not marry Andrew for money. That mattered later because the Carlisle family spent years acting like I had. Andrew Carlisle came from one of those Southern families that still use the word legacy in ordinary conversation. Carlisle Realty, Carlisle Hardware, Carlisle Civic Foundation, Carlisle Family Christmas Brunch. Everything had the name on it. By the time I met Andrew, most of the old money was gone, but the performance remained, the house remained, the portraits remained, the silver serving trays remained, the habit of looking down on people remained. Andrew was different, or I thought he was. He was quieter than the rest of them, kinder, a little embarrassed by the way his mother corrected waiters and the way Vanessa mentioned private school in conversations that did not require it. We met at a commercial real estate conference in Raleigh. I was a property acquisition analyst then, working long hours for a firm that bought distressed buildings and turned them into clinics, offices, and affordable rental units. Andrew was there representing Carlisle Realty, a small family brokerage trying to look bigger than it was. He approached me after a panel on historic property tax credits and said, You asked the only useful question in that entire room. I liked him immediately, not because he was handsome, though he was dark hair, tired blue eyes, a smile that made him look like he wanted to be honest even when he was nervous. I liked him because he listened, at least at first. Our relationship moved slowly. Coffee, dinner. Long walks through old neighborhoods where we pointed out houses we would restore if we had unlimited money and no common sense. He told me about his family's old house, Cedar Hill. He described it with real love. My great-grandfather bought it after the war, he said. Every Carlisle wedding photo, reunion, funeral lunch, Christmas morning, everything happened there. I remember smiling. That sounds beautiful. It is, he said, but complicated. I should have asked what complicated meant. Instead, I fell in love. When Andrew introduced me to his family, Margaret Carlisle looked me over like I was a sofa being considered for a formal room. Well, she said, you're very career-focused. It was not a compliment. His sister Vanessa asked what my parents did. My father had been a mechanic. My mother worked in a school cafeteria for 22 years. When I told them, Vanessa smiled with the careful politeness people use when they think they are hiding disappointment. Andrew squeezed my hand under the table. Later, in the car, he apologized. They can be old-fashioned. That phrase should have warned me. Old-fashioned often means rude with china plates. The first year was manageable. Little comments, small exclusions. Margaret introducing me as Andrew's wife. Natalie, instead of family. Vanessa telling me, you probably didn't grow up with this kind of thing. Whenever someone discussed old silver or formal dinners, his brother Grant, joking that I worked too much to be a proper Carlisle. I smiled, I adjusted, I told myself every family had sharp corners. Then the money problems started. Carlisle Realty had been struggling long before I arrived. The old family name still impressed retirees and church ladies, but the market had changed. Bigger firms had better software, better marketing, better agents, better everything. Andrew was trying to modernize the business. Margaret hated change. Vanessa wanted commissions without doing the work. Grant borrowed from the company like it was a private wallet, and Cedar Hill, the sacred family house, was quietly bleeding them dry. Property taxes, insurance, roof repairs, electrical problems, faunia cracks. A kitchen that had not been updated since the early 90s. A heating system that sounded like it was haunted. The Carlisle family loved the idea of Cedar Hill. They did not love paying for it. 2 years into our marriage, Andrew came home late and sat at the kitchen table without taking off his coat. I knew immediately something was wrong. What happened? He rubbed both hands over his face. Mom didn't pay the property taxes. On Cedar Hill? He nodded. For how long? He did not answer. That was answer enough. I asked to see the documents. At first, he resisted. Then he brought me a folder. The situation was worse than unpaid taxes. There were liens, deferred maintenance bills. A private loan Margaret had taken against another small parcel connected to the estate. A pending notice that could eventually lead to forced sale if they did not get current. Andrew looked wrecked. It would kill my mother if we lost that house. What does your family plan to do? He laughed once, bitterly. Pretend it isn't happening until someone else fixes it. Someone else. He meant me, though he did not say it. That night, I did something generous and foolish. I reviewed everything. I built a rescue plan. Not because Margaret deserved it. Not because Vanessa or Grant would thank me. Because Andrew loved that house. Because I loved Andrew. Because I thought saving something he loved might finally make his family see me as more than the woman who had married in. My company, Price Urban Holdings, specialized in acquiring distressed properties quietly, clearing liens, and stabilizing assets. I proposed a clean solution. The family could transfer Cedar Hill to one of my company's holding entities, Cedar Hill Preservation LLC. I would pay the back taxes, clear the liens, cover immediate repairs, preserve family access under a long-term use agreement, and prevent the property from being sold to developers. In plain language, I would buy the house, save it, and let the family keep using it for gatherings. Andrew was ashamed. I could see it, he said. They'll never agree if they know it's you. He was right. Margaret would rather let the roof collapse than admit I saved it. So the agreement was handled through attorneys, legally clean, fully documented. Margaret signed the sale paperwork believing a preservation investor had purchased the property and granted the family continued access out of respect for the Carlisle history. Andrew knew the investor was my company. Margaret did not, Vanessa did not, Grant did not. That was my mistake. Not the purchase, the secrecies. Accords created to protect arrogant people usually become weapons against the person who stayed quiet. For 5 years I owned Cedar Hill. For 5 years the Carlisle family kept treating it like their kingdom. They hosted Christmas brunch there, Easter lunch, baby showers, birthday dinners, fundraisers, Margaret's garden club tea, Vanessa's daughter's graduation party, Grant's second engagement dinner, all under my roof, all because I allowed it. I paid the property taxes. I paid for the roof. I paid for the kitchen restoration Margaret bragged about to her friends. I paid for the porch repair after Grant drove a golf cart into the railing during a 4th of July party. I paid for plumbing after the upstairs bathroom leaked through the dining room ceiling. And each time Margaret gave a speech about preserving family legacy, she never once mentioned the anonymous investor who made it possible. Of course she didn't, because in her mind, generosity from someone invisible was not generosity, it was just luck. Meanwhile, my marriage was changing, slowly, then all at once. Andrew hated lying to his family, but not enough to tell the truth. He would say things like, "Mom has been through enough," or "Vanessa would make it ugly," or "Grant would start asking for money," or my least favorite, "Can we just keep the peace?" Keep the peace. In families like the Carlisles, peace meant Margaret got what she wanted, and everyone else swallowed the cost. I swallowed too. Until I couldn't. The breaking point started with Thanksgiving. I had worked for 3 weeks coordinating repairs at Cedar Hill before the holiday. A new water heater, restored floorboards in the hallway, chimney cleaning, pest treatment in the old pantry. All of it scheduled around Margaret's insistence that Thanksgiving must feel traditional. On Thanksgiving morning I arrived early with 2 pies and a casserole. Margaret opened the door, looked behind me and said, "Where is Andrew? He's parking." Oh, no hello. No thank you, just Andrew first. In the kitchen, Vanessa was arranging flowers in vases I had bought 2 years earlier. She looked at my casserole and said, "That's sweet. We already have enough sides." I placed it on the counter. "Then you'll have one more." Grant wandered in with a drink before noon and asked if I had finally taken a day off from buying half the state. Margaret laughed. I did not. During dinner, Margaret announced she wanted to restart monthly Carlisle Family Council meetings. "Important decisions should be made by blood family," she said. The table went quiet for half a second. Andrew glanced at me, then away. Blood family. I waited for him to say something. He didn't, so I said, "Does marriage not count?" Margaret smiled. "Of course it does, dear. In the right context." The right context turned out to be cleaning the kitchen, bringing food, organizing vendors, attending events, writing checks nobody knew existed, and staying silent during insults. That night, I told Andrew I was tired. He said, "Mom didn't mean it that way." I said, "She always means it exactly enough." We argued for an hour, not loudly, worse, quickly. The kind of argument where both people know the truth and one keeps asking the other to pretend. "You need to tell them about Cedar Hill," I said. Andrew froze. "No, yes, Nat, that would humiliate my mother. She has been humiliating me in a house I own for 5 years." He looked pained. "But still," he said, "please, not yet. I loved him. That was the problem. Love made me postpone truth again." 2 months later, Margaret invited everyone to Cedar Hill for what she called a family reset dinner. The phrase sounded harmless. It was not. I knew something was wrong when Andrew put on a dress shirt without asking what I was wearing. He was nervous. I asked, "What is this dinner really about?" He looked away. "Mom wants to talk about boundaries." "With who?" He did not answer. My chest tightened. "With me," he finally said. "She thinks there's been tension." I stared at him. "She thinks?" "Nat, please don't go in angry." "I'm not angry yet, but I was getting there." When we arrived at Cedar Hill, there were more cars than usual. Margaret's sedan, Vanessa's SUV, Grant's truck, Aunt Lydia's Buick, 2 cousins, even Grandma Ruth, who rarely came out after dark. The dining room was set formally, good china, crystal glasses, candles. A printed agenda beside each plate, an agenda for a family dinner at the top in Margaret's elegant script. It read, "Carlisle Family Participation and Event Boundaries." He looked at Andrew. He looked sick. "Did you know about this?" he whispered. "Not exactly." That meant yes. Dinner was tense and pointless. No one cared about the food. Margaret barely touched hers. Vanessa kept glancing at the agenda. Grant drank too much. Grandma Ruth looked confused and sad. After dessert, Margaret stood. That was how it began. She thanked everyone for coming. She spoke about tradition, unity, legacy, and the importance of protecting family spaces from conflict. Then she looked at me. "Natalie, this is not meant to hurt you." I leaned back in my chair. "Then it's already off to a bad start." Vanessa sighed. "There, that tone. That's exactly what we're talking about." Grant muttered, "Always has to make it about herself." Andrew said softly, "Grant, not enough. Never enough," Margaret continued. "For some time, several members of this family have felt that your presence at certain gatherings has made people uncomfortable." I looked around. "Several members?" Vanessa raised her chin. Grant looked away. Aunt Lydia stared at her plate. I almost laughed. "Towards love committees." Margaret said, "We have decided the fairest way is to take a vote." "A vote," I repeated. Andrew closed his eyes. That should have been the moment he stood. That should have been the moment he said no. "You do not vote on my wife." But he stayed seated. Margaret lifted her hand. all in favor of removing Natalie from future Carlisle family gatherings and limiting participation in family decisions to blood relatives and invited guests only. There it was, the sentence that cut 7 years down to one word. Guests. I watched every hand rise. I watched Vanessa avoid my eyes. I watched Grant smirk. I watched Aunt Lydia tremble but still raise her fingers. I watched Grandma Ruth look at Margaret before lifting her hand halfway like a child, afraid of getting an answer wrong. And then I watched Andrew do nothing. That was the part that ended something. Not Margaret, not the vote. Andrew's stillness. When I stood, the room looked surprised, as if the vote had included my dignity too. Margaret said, "Natalie, sit down. We need to finish this properly." "No," I said. "You finished it." Andrew reached for my hand. I moved before he touched me. His face broke a little. "Good, some breaking is overdue." I looked at Margaret. "You held a vote to remove me from family events." She inhaled. "That is a harsh way to describe." "It is the accurate way," Vanessa said. "Nobody is saying you can never attend anything." I looked at her. "You just voted on my attendance," Grant muttered. "It's not like you're a Carlisle by blood." I smiled. "No, I'm not." Then I looked around the dining room, the restored ceiling, the polished floor. The antique sideboard I had paid to repair, the new windows that kept winter from entering, the walls that had heard 5 years of me being treated like an intruder. I turned back to Andrew. "You have 1 week." His eyes filled with panic. "Nat, 1 week," I repeated. Then I left. I did not slam the door. That would have given Margaret a sound to criticize. I walked out with my head high, down the porch steps I had paid to rebuild, across the gravel drive I had paid to resurface, into my car, and then I drove home alone. Andrew did not come home that night. He stayed at Cedar Hill. That told me more than any conversation could have. The next morning, he came in at 7:12, still wearing yesterday's shirt. I was at the kitchen table with coffee and a folder. Not crying, not yelling, working. He stopped in the doorway. "Nat." I did not look up. "Did you tell them?" He rubbed his face. I tried. That was a no. What does tried mean? It was not the right time. I finally looked at him. "They voted me out of my own house last night. What would the right time look like?" He sat across from me. "Please don't do anything drastic." I smiled sadly. "Andrew, I think I married into a family that has been doing drastic things politely for generations." He reached for my hand. This time I let him touch it for 2 seconds, then I pulled away. "I am sending notice." His face changed. "What kind of notice?" "The kind an owner sends when unauthorized occupants and event users violate a use agreement." He whispered, "Natalie, that's my family, and I was your wife." The words landed between us like something heavy was. He heard it. I saw him hear it. For the next week, Andrew tried everything except courage. He asked for more time. He asked me to think about Grandma Ruth. He said Margaret's health was fragile. He said Vanessa was already upset. He said Grant would explode. He said the family would never forgive him. Not once did he say, "They should never have done that to you." Not once did he say, "I should have stood up." Not until the 6th day. By then it was too late. On the 6th night, he found me in my office reviewing the Cedar Hill file. The original purchase agreement, tax records, repair invoices, use agreement, insurance policy, attorney correspondence, proof stacked like bricks. He stood in the doorway. "I failed you." I did not turn around. "Yes, I was afraid. I know. I thought if I told them, they would hate you more." I closed the folder. "No, Andrew. You thought they would hate you." He said nothing. That was the truth. His family's approval had been the roof he lived under emotionally. And he had let me stand outside in the rain so he could stay dry. I turned. "I am not asking you to choose between me and your family." He looked relieved too soon. "I am telling you that you already did." The next morning, my attorney sent the letter, certified mail. Courier copy to Cedar Hill. The recipients were Margaret Carlisle, Vanessa Carlisle Reed, Grant Carlisle, Andrew Carlisle, and all listed family event users under the Cedar Hill Preservation LLC Access Agreement subject. Notice of termination of informal family use privileges and scheduled property access review. It was professional, cold clear. It stated that Cedar Hill was owned by Cedar Hill Preservation LLC, a company solely controlled by me. It stated that the Carlisle family had been allowed informal gathering access under a preservation use arrangement conditioned on respectful use, lawful conduct, and owner approval. It stated that the family vote held on the property to exclude the owner's spouse and deny her participation constituted hostile conduct toward the property owner. That line was Dana's idea. My attorney, Dane Cho, had a gift for making humiliation sound like a legal category. The letter gave them 48 hours to remove personal belongings from any storage areas and suspended all future events pending written approval. It also included a full schedule of payments my company had made over 5 years. Back taxes, Leon's roof, kitchen plumbing, insurance, grounds porch repairs, window restoration, total $412,680. I did not include that number to brag. I included it because illusions die faster when they have receipts. Margaret called first. I did not answer. Vanessa called. Grant called. Aunt Lydia texted. Is this real? Grandma Ruth left a voicemail crying. Then Andrew's phone started ringing. He was sitting across from me when Margaret's name appeared. He looked at me. I said answer it. He did. I heard her through the speaker, even though it was not on speaker. What did she do? Andrew closed his eyes. Mom, what did your wife do to our house? I stood and walked to the window. Andrew said, she owns it. Silence. Then Margaret laughed. A strange laugh, short and sharp. Don't be ridiculous. She owns it, he repeated. She has for 5 years. Another silence, then Vanessa's voice in the background. That's impossible. Grant shouted something I could not make out. Margaret said, Andrew Carlisle, you explain this right now. He looked at me. For once I did not rescue him, so he told her. Haltingly, badly late. But finally, he told her about the liens, the unpaid taxes, the forced sale risk, the preservation company, the repairs, the access agreement, the fact that Cedar Hill had been saved not by family legacy, but by the woman they voted out. I watched his face while he spoke. Shame is useful only when it becomes action. That day, his shame finally did. At 5 p.m., the entire Carlisle family gathered at Cedar Hill. Not by my invitation, by Margaret's panic. I know because the security cameras sent alerts to my phone. Yes, Cedar Hill had cameras. Of course it did. I owned it. Dana advised me not to go. Andrew asked if he should. I said, do what you should have done last week. He went. I stayed home and watched the camera feed from my laptop. Margaret stood in the dining room holding the letter with shaking hands. Vanessa paced. Grant yelled. Aunt Lydia cried quietly. Grandma Ruth sat in Craig's old chair near the window, looking smaller than I remembered. Andrew entered at 5:23. Everyone turned on him. Grant shouted, You let your wife steal our house? Andrew said, She didn't steal it. Mom signed the sale. Margaret snapped, I signed to protect it. Yes, Andrew said, and Natalie protected it. That sentence changed the room. Not enough, but some. Vanessa pointed at him. You should have told us. I should have, he said. You humiliated us. No, Andrew said. You humiliated my wife. The truth humiliated you. I sat very still when I heard that. 7 years late. But true, Margaret lowered into a chair. She let us live a lie. Andrew looked at her. No, Mom, we demanded one. Grant threw his hands up. So what now? We beg her to use our own house? Andrew turned on him. It is not our house. Grant looked ready to hit him. He did not. Cordis runs deep in men who shout around legal documents. Then Grandma Ruth spoke quickly. Margaret. Everyone turned. The old woman's voice trembled but held. Did Natalie pay for the roof? Margaret did not answer. Grandma Ruth asked again. Did she? Andrew said, Yes. The taxes? Yes. The kitchen? Yes. The porch? Yes. Grandma Ruth looked down at her hands. I thanked you for that porch, Margaret. Margaret's face crumpled, just a little. I was trying to preserve the family. Grandma Ruth shook her head. You preserved your pride with another woman's money. The room went silent. That one sentence did more than the attorney letter, because Margaret could dismiss me. Dismiss Andrew, dismiss Dana. But Grandma Ruth was Carlisle blood, the oldest living Carlisle, the woman whose wedding photos hung in the hallway. And she had named the truth. I closed my laptop after that, not because I did not want to know what happened next, because I no longer needed to watch. The next morning, Margaret came to my house, alone. She stood on my porch wearing a gray coat and no lipstick. For the first time since I had met her, she looked unassembled. I opened the door but did not invite her in. That mattered, she noticed. Natalie. Margaret, she swallowed. I did not know. No, you did not ask. Her face tightened. I knew an investor purchased it. I did not know it was you. I know you should have told me. I almost smiled. So you could thank me or reject my help before benefiting from it? She looked away. Fair, I continued. I wanted to tell you. Andrew asked me not to because your pride was too fragile to survive gratitude. That hit. She gripped her purse. I did not handle the dinner well. I stared at her. You held a vote to remove me from family events. Her eyes filled with tears. Yes, you watched people raise their hands. Yes, you watched your son stay silent. A tear slid down her cheek. Yes, and now you are here because you lost access to Cedar Hill. No, I waited. She pressed her lips together, then whispered, Not only that, that was probably the closest Margaret Carlisle had ever come to emotional honesty. She looked past me into the house, not intrusively, just searching. I have spent my whole life believing that house made us a family. I said nothing. And when I found out it belonged to you, I felt like you had taken something from me. I remained silent. She closed her eyes. But you did not take it. You kept it standing. That was the first true thing she said. I leaned against the doorframe. Margaret, I am not interested in punishing your family forever. Hope flickered across her face. I raised one hand. But access will change. No more informal gatherings. No more assuming. No more family councils in my dining room. No more events without written approval. No more treating me like staff in a house I own. She nodded quickly. Too quickly, I said, and no more Andrew translating your disrespect into excuses. Her face flushed. That is between you and Andrew. No, I said. It involved you when you trained him to fear your disappointment more than his wife's pain. She had no answer. Good, some truths should not be answered immediately. She left without being invited inside. That was also a boundary. Andrew moved into the guest room that week, not because I threw him out, because he offered. I need to feel what distance is, he said. That sounded like something a therapist told him. I appreciated it anyway. He started counseling, alone first. Then asked if I would attend with him. I said yes once, then twice, then not the third time, because I was not sure I wanted to repair what he had allowed to break. The therapist asked Andrew what he felt during the vote. He said, afraid. Of what? He looked at me. Of losing my family, the therapist asked. What did you lose by not speaking? Andrew cried. For the first time I did not comfort him. Not because I wanted him to suffer, because his tears were not my assignment anymore. Over the next few months, the Carlisle family changed in uneven ways. Vanessa apologized by text first. It was terrible. I'm sorry things got misunderstood. I replied with one sentence. Nothing was misunderstood. 3 days later, she sent another. I'm sorry I raised my hand better. Grant never apologized. He called me a corporate vulture to a cousin, who immediately sent me the screenshot because family loyalty becomes flexible around property access. Grant was permanently banned from Cedar Hill events after that. That decision brought me peace. Aunt Lydia wrote a handwritten note. She admitted she raised her hand because Margaret had called her beforehand and told her the vote was necessary to protect Andrew's future. She wrote, I am ashamed that I let someone else's certainty override my conscience. I accepted that apology. Grandma Ruth called me every Sunday for a month. Not to ask for the house, to ask about me. That surprised me most. One afternoon she said, I wish I had asked who was paying for everything. I said, so do I. She laughed sadly. You are not very good at making old women feel better. No good, she said. Too many people do that. Cedar Hill remained closed for 3 months. No Christmas brunch, no Easter lunch, no garden club tea. Margaret had to host Vanessa's birthday dinner at a restaurant, where Grant complained about the parking and Vanessa cried because nothing feels normal anymore. Normal to them had been access without gratitude. I was not responsible for restoring that. Eventually, I allowed one event, Grandma Ruth's 86th birthday. Written agreement, limited guest list, no Grant professional cleaning deposit, no family votes of any kind. Margaret did not laugh when she read that clause. Andrew did. That was a small sign of progress. On the day of the birthday, I went to Cedar Hill early, not to host. To open the property, the house was quiet when I arrived. Sunlight fell through the restored windows onto the dining room floor. The table was empty. For a moment, I stood in the room where they had raised their hands against me. I expected anger. Instead, I felt clarity. A room is not guilty, a table is not cruel. A house only holds what people bring into it. That day, I brought boundaries. Margaret arrived 30 minutes later carrying flowers. She stopped in the doorway. Natalie, Margaret. She looked at the table, then at me. I am sorry for what I did in this room. Not perfect, but direct. I nodded. Thank you. She waited, maybe expecting more. Forgiveness, warmth, a hug. I gave her none of that. I gave her the truth. I'm allowing today because Grandma Ruth deserves peace, not because everything is fixed. Margaret swallowed. I understand. I believed she was beginning to. During the party, Grandma Ruth sat at the head of the table wearing a lavender dress and a paper crown one of the children insisted she wear. When the cake came out, she tapped her fork against her glass. Everyone quieted. She looked at me first, then Margaret, then Andrew. I have lived long enough, she said, to know that a family is not the people who claim a house. It is the people who honor what keeps it standing. The room went still. Her eyes rested on me. Natalie, thank you for keeping Cedar Hill standing. No one moved for a second. Then Aunt Lydia began clapping, then Andrew, then Vanessa, then Margaret, with tears in her eyes. I did not stand. I did not need to. This was not a victory parade. It was acknowledgement. That was enough. After the party, Andrew helped me lock up. For a while, we moved through the house quietly, checking windows, turning off lights, collecting stray plates. In the dining room, he stopped. I should have stood up that night. Yes, I keep replaying it. Good. He flinched but accepted it. I turned toward him. Andrew, I don't know if we survive this. His eyes filled. I know, but if we do, it will not be because your family accepts me, he nodded. It will be because I learn how to be your husband before I am their son. That was the first sentence that sounded like a beginning instead of an excuse. We did not fix everything quickly. Real damage takes its time leaving the body. There were weeks I still looked at him and saw the man staring into a water glass while hands rose around me. There were nights he slept in the guest room because I could not bear the closeness. There were therapy sessions where I said things that made him cry and things that made me cry and things that made both of us sit in exhausted silence. But he kept showing up, not perfectly consistently. He told his mother no. He told Vanessa to apologize without conditions. He told Grant he was not welcome in our home. He told me the truth even when it made him look weak. That mattered. A year after the vote, Andrew and I renewed our vows privately, not at Cedar Hill, not with his family, not with mine, just us, on a small overlook near the Blue Ridge Parkway, with a retired judge who wore hiking boots under her robe and told us we looked like people who had fought hard to stand still. Andrew wrote his own vows. He said, "I once thought peace meant avoiding conflict. I understand now that peace without truth is just silence wearing a nice shirt." I almost laughed. Then he said, "I will not let anyone vote on your place in my life again. Not my mother, not my family. Not even the frightened version of me that used to confuse loyalty with obedience." That line reached me, not because it erased what happened, because it proved he knew what had happened, and sometimes being seen clearly is the first real repair. As for Cedar Hill, it is still mine. The Carlisle family still uses it sometimes, under written agreements, with deposits, with respect. Margaret once joked that I run the family like a courthouse. I said no. A courthouse gives more warnings. She laughed, a real laugh. Maybe that is healing. Or maybe it is just two women learning where the fence is. Either way, I'll take it. I do not believe every family wound needs to end with permanent exile. Some do, some absolutely do. But others require structured distant, paperwork, locked doors, new rules. People who truly want relationship will learn the rules. People who only wanted access will call rules cruelty. That is how you tell the difference. If you are listening to this because someone once made you feel like an outsider in a place your labor, love, money, or silence help build, remember this: they can vote, they can whisper, they can raise hands, they can call you difficult, they can say blood matters more than marriage, more than kindness, more than sacrifice, more than truth. But a vote does not decide your worth. A family table is not sacred if it is used to humiliate people. A house is not a home because a surname hangs in the hallway. It becomes a home when the people inside stop confusing ownership with entitlement. My husband's family voted to cut me off. They did it under a roof I owned, at a table I had paid to preserve, in a dining room I had restored. They thought they were deciding whether I belonged. 1 week later, they learned I owned the house they met in, and here is the truth. The best part was not watching Margaret's face when she opened the letter. It was not hearing Andrew finally tell them I saved Cedar Hill. It was not seeing Grant banned, Vanessa humbled, or the family forced to ask permission. The best part was realizing I did not need their vote anymore. I had spent years waiting for the Carlisles to invite me fully into the family, but that night, when their hands went up, they accidentally freed me from the audition. My name is Natalie Price Carlisle. I am not blood Carlisle. I am not Margaret's chosen daughter-in-law. I am not Grant's idea of family. I am not Vanessa's convenient outsider. I am the woman who kept Cedar Hill standing when Legacy could not pay its own taxes. And I will never again beg for a seat at a table that sits under my roof. If this story made you angry, comment not your table below. Tell me honestly, should Natalie forgive Andrew after he stayed silent, or was that silence unforgivable? And subscribe for more emotional stories where the quiet woman finally opens the file, sends the letter, and lets the truth take its seat at the head of the table.